They say the eyes never lie. But what happens when two pairs of eyes speak a language the world can't understand? Welcome to Aankhon Gustaakhiyan, a fragile romance of fate, a story about two souls brought together not by words, but by glances, gestures, and the unspoken moments that change everything. On a rainy morning in Mumbai, where the city rushes forward without waiting for anyone, a quiet bookstore tucked in a narrow lane holds secrets of its own. That's where Araf first sees Meha. She's not like anyone he's ever met. She isn't loud, she doesn't try to stand out. But there's something about her eyes, something that feels like home. Araf, a struggling writer chasing a story that will finally get him published, finds himself drawn to her without knowing why. Meha, on the other hand, lives in a world filled with silence. She lost her hearing at the age of 8, and since then, has found comfort in books, colors, and the rhythm of silence. She's used to people treating her differently, with either pity or discomfort. But Araf doesn't flinch. He doesn't ask questions. He just smiles. And somehow, in his presence, Meha feels seen. Their story unfolds slowly, almost like a song playing in the background, a soft, uncertain, but deeply moving. They begin meeting at the same bookstore, day after day, exchanging notes on old paperbacks, drawing little doodles in the margins of novels, letting their connection grow in a space where words don't matter. And yet, something lingers between them, a distance, a hesitation, like they're both afraid to name what they feel. Araf is inspired. For the first time in years, his words flow. He begins writing again, pouring his heart into pages shaped by Meha's silence and strength. But there's something he doesn't know. Meha is hiding a part of her past that could change everything, something she's never spoken about, not even in notes or glances. And the closer Araf gets to her heart, the closer he gets to a truth that might push them apart. As their bond deepens, fate throws a test neither of them saw coming. A miscommunication, a missed moment, and suddenly the silence between them is no longer comforting, it's heartbreaking. Will Araf find a way to understand what Meha couldn't say? Or will their fragile love story fade away before it truly begins? This is not just a story of romance, it's about courage, about listening without ears, and about the power of connection in a world that often forgets to pause. Stay with us as we explore Aankhon Gustaakhiyan, where every glance carries a secret, and every silence hides a storm. And just when everything seems perfect, something happens, something that will change everything they believed about each other. But we'll come to that in the next part. The day everything changed started just like any other. The same bookstore, the same corner by the window. Araf came in with 2 coffees, one for him, one for her, just how she liked it, extra warm with a hint of cinnamon. Meha was already there, flipping through a poetry book, lost in her quiet world. Araf watched her for a moment before walking over, still trying to find the courage to ask what had been burning inside him for weeks. Who was she before all this? Before the bookstore, before him. But before he could hand her the coffee, Meha slipped a note across the table. "Don't look for the past," it said, in her neat handwriting. "It never comes back the way you hope it will." Araf stared at the words longer than he meant to. There was something final about it, something heavy. He didn't ask her anything that day, but that note stayed with him, lingering like a half-finished thought. Araf had always believed that love was about the future, about what two people could build together. But now he was beginning to realize that the past still had a hold on her, like a shadow that refused to leave. He started noticing small things. Meha would sometimes flinch when a certain name was mentioned in a book. She had a scar on her wrist she never explained. And one day, when he accidentally dropped a photo of his late mother, she froze, not at the photo, but at the sound of the frame hitting the floor. Her body reacted before her mind did. Araf wondered how someone who couldn't hear could have such a sharp reaction to sound. That moment stayed with him. The more time he spent with Meha, the more questions he had. And yet, he didn't want to push her away by asking them. She was a puzzle with pieces missing, but not in a broken way, in a way that made you want to stay and understand. But something else was happening too. Araf's new short story, the one inspired by Meha, had caught the attention of a publishing house. They wanted to meet him. They wanted to know what inspired the emotion behind the piece. He didn't know how to tell them the truth, that the story wasn't just fiction, that it belonged to someone else's silence, someone who hadn't given him permission to share it. And just as he wrestled with that choice, he noticed something in Mayha's notebook the next day. A name, circled and scribbled over. Dev. Who was Dev? Araf didn't ask, but everything inside him told him he should have. That night, Araf couldn't sleep. The name Dev kept echoing in his mind. It was just a word, but the way Mayha had scratched it over and over in her notebook, it felt personal, painful. It wasn't just someone from her past. It was someone she was still running from. And maybe, just maybe, the silence between them wasn't just because she couldn't hear it was because there were things she didn't want him to know. While Araf struggled with his own dilemma whether to publish the story inspired by Hira, he also began noticing the shift in Mayha. She had grown distant, not cold, but quieter than usual. Some days, she would stare out the bookstore window longer than she read. Other days, she wouldn't show up at all. When he texted, she replied with short messages, vague answers, or nothing at all. Meanwhile, Araf's best friend, Nick Hill, who worked as a junior editor at the publishing house, started asking questions. "You sure this character isn't based on someone real?" he said, raising an eyebrow at Araf's manuscript. "Because man, there's something raw in these pages." And it was true. The character, Myra, was Mayha in every way. Her way of folding paper corners, the way her fingers danced in the air while signing, her smile that always seemed like it was hiding something. Araf had bared her soul on the page, and now that the story was getting attention, it didn't feel like an achievement to it. Felt like betrayal. But the biggest twist came 2 days later, when Araf saw Mayha arguing with someone at the end of the street. He couldn't hear what was being said, but he didn't need to. The man's face was tense, angry, and Mayha, she looked afraid. Araf didn't know who he was, but he had a feeling. It was Dev. Araf stood frozen on the opposite side of the street, hidden behind the shadow of a parked car, watching the scene unfold. Mayha's body was tense, her hands moving rapidly in sign language, but the man Dev, Araf now knew, wasn't paying attention to her signs. He grabbed her wrist, not violently, but firmly, like someone who thought he still had the right. Mayha pulled back, her face a mixture of fear and anger. Araf felt his heart pound, but something held him back. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was the feeling of betrayal creeping into his chest, heavier with every second. He had wanted to believe her silence was gentle, poetic. But now he realized there were secrets buried in it, real ones, dangerous ones. Later that evening, she finally came to the bookstore. Her eyes found him quickly, as if she already knew he had seen. She didn't explain. She didn't deny it. She just sat down across from him and placed a small photo on the table. It was of her and Diva smiling, once upon a time. But it wasn't happiness. Not real happiness. Not the kind Araf had seen in her when they were together. He picked up the photo, then looked at her, waiting for her to speak. She didn't. Araf's phone buzzed. A message from the publisher. "We're moving forward with the story. You'll need to be available for press next week. Be ready." He stared at the screen, feeling like a fraud. Every word they wanted to print came from someone else's life, a life still unfinished. A story still unfolding in front of him, painfully and honestly. And as he looked up at Mayha again, he realized the choice wasn't about fiction or truth anymore. It was about trust, and whether he still had hers. Araf stared at Mayha, unsure of what to say. The silence between them, once soft and comforting, now felt sharp, filled with things neither of them had the courage to say aloud. He slid the photo back toward her, his fingers hesitating for a moment before pulling away. She didn't reach for it. Her eyes didn't move. It was as if she'd accepted something, maybe an end, maybe guilt. Just when Araf thought he might break the silence, Mayhu stood up and placed a sealed envelope on the table. Inside was a letter, not typed, not written like her usual notes, but deeply personal, pages long. She gestured for him to read it later, then left without waiting for a reply. That night, Araf read it in pieces, stopping every few lines to breathe. It wasn't just about Dev. It was about everything Ameha had hidden. Years ago, Dev wasn't just someone she loved, he was someone who broke her in ways she never fully recovered from. The accident that cost her hearing wasn't random. It came after one of their arguments, when she'd left his house crying, not knowing she was stepping into a dark, stormy street. A drunk driver never saw her. She had rebuilt her life from that moment alone, in silence, carrying fear like a second skin. And now Dev was back, not with an apology, but with a threat. He knew about the story. Somehow, someone had sent him a draft. Araf's draft. Araf's chest tightened. He had only ever shared it with one persona, Nikhil. Could it be a leak? A mistake? Or was he broken bar intentional? His phone buzzed again. This time, a text from an unknown number. You think you can turn my life into your story? Take her from me? Be careful what you write next. The blood drained from Araf's face. This was no longer about love, or even betrayal. It was becoming dangerous, real. The stakes had changed, and with every word he had written, every emotion he had poured onto the page, Araf had unknowingly stepped into a storm Meha had spent years trying to escape. And now, there was no turning back. The next morning, Araf didn't go to the bookstore. He went straight to Nikhil's office, his heart racing. Without wasting a second, he walked in and placed the threatening message on the desk. Nikhil's face fell. At first, he tried to deny it, but the guilt in his eyes gave him away. I didn't mean for it to get out, he muttered. I only showed it to someone from marketing. Dev must have gotten hold of it somehow. I didn't know who she was to him. Araf didn't respond. He just walked away, a storm building inside him. That night, Araf met Meha outside the bookstore. She looked tired, worn down by the weight of everything she'd been carrying. He handed her the envelope of printed manuscripts, now torn and scratched through with a red marker. I'm not publishing it, he said softly. It's your story, not mine to tell. Meha looked at him, her eyes moist. For the first time, she reached out, gently touching his hand, a simple gesture that said more than any word could. Just as they were about to walk away together, a black car pulled up across the street. Dev stepped out. His smile was cold, confident, like he still believed he had control over both of them. Araf stepped forward, shielding Meha without thinking. But Meha didn't hide. She stepped around Araf and faced Dev head-on. Calm, clear, and with no fear. She raised her hands, signing with a strength that shook him. Her final message, you don't control me. You never did. Before Dev could respond, a police car pulled in behind him. Araf looked surprised. Meha nodded, pulling out her phone. I pressed charges last week, she typed on the screen, showing it to him. For what he did then, and what he tried now. Dev was taken away, shouting, but it was over. At least that chapter was. As they sat under the old tree by the bookstore, Araf turned to her. What now? He asked. Meha smiled faintly, pulling out a new notebook. She handed it to him. On the first page, in her handwriting, were the words, let's write something new together. And just when he thought the story had ended, she pulled something from her bag, his old manuscript, the first draft. You didn't finish it, she signed. You forgot the last chapter. He looked at her, confused. She smiled. I wrote it. Araf sat quietly as Meha handed him the final chapter she had written. The paper was worn at the edges, ink smudged in places, but every word carried weight. Her words weren't just a continuation of the story, they were a piece of her. The chapter didn't end with heartbreak or silence. It ended with hope, a slow rebuilding, a love that understood pain, but didn't get defined by it. Araf read every word slowly, then looked up, overwhelmed. She had finished what he never could, not because he lacked the talent, but because it was never his ending to write alone. Over the next few weeks, things began to shift. Araf withdrew the old version of the manuscript from the publisher, but not without a fight. Instead, he submitted the co-written version, Meha's name printed right beside his. The publishers hesitated, but couldn't deny the raw emotion and layered storytelling in the final draft. It wasn't just a love story anymore. It was a story about healing, courage, and how love doesn't fix everything, it simply stays when things break. Meha, once tucked away in the background of her own life, started sharing more of her journey through writing. Her words, even in silence, found power. Araf's career changed, Yes, but more importantly, his understanding of storytelling deepened. Not every story needs to be rescued. Some just need to be heard. Dev's case moved through the system slowly, but Mayhew didn't live in fear anymore. The bookstore remained their safe space, but it was no longer a hiding place. Here it became a meeting point, where new pages began. As seasons passed, their bond stayed steady, not perfect, but honest. Mayhew would still scribble notes in the corners of books, and Araf would still smile when he found them. They wrote side by side, sometimes in silence, sometimes not. Their story wasn't loud, but it was real. And maybe that's what Aankhon Gustaakhiyan truly meant, not the recklessness of a glance, but the bravery to keep looking at someone even when life gets hard. The courage to stay, to write the next chapter, and to believe in a love that listens without needing sound. Their story ended the way it began, not with grand gestures, but with eyes that said everything.